Well, good morning, YouTube. Today, we're going to be working on Project Kenworth again. As you saw in the last video, we were able to get both of the rear differentials installed. So today, what we've got to do is hook the drive shafts back up. And I'm hoping that by the end of this video, we will be able to take this thing for a short ride. Now, it's not tagged, so we're probably not going to leave the parking lot, and there's no headlights in it. You know, we've got a lot of this stuff torn apart, getting it ready for paint as well. But if we get the drive shafts in, get all the lube put into the differentials, it should at least be drivable. All right, guys, just a quick refresher. There is the reman unit that we put in. So we've got to take the drive shaft that connects to that yoke and then comes up to the output on the power divider. And then we've got to hook the drive shaft up there to the input of the power divider. Also got to hook up an air line right there. All right, guys, but before we get started, I need to put the batteries on charge because Project Kenworth, the batteries don't seem to be holding a charge. And when we put this thing on the road, we're going to put brand new batteries in before we do it. But I didn't want to spend that money on the batteries until we were ready to put it on the road in case it sits here, especially in the winter with it getting cold. We could put $1,000 worth of batteries in there and end up having to replace them that much sooner. So we're just going to wait. These batteries work okay as long as we don't let the truck sit. And of course, right now, it's sitting a lot. So we're going to go ahead and put these on charge. So the reinstallation of the drive shaft and all the new universal joints, hopefully the batteries will be topped off by the time we're ready to actually start it when we're done. All right, guys, and as you can see here, we're using Spicer brand universal joints for this drive shaft. Now, I have no reason to believe that the drive shaft in Project Kenworth are bad, but we've got it apart, so we might as well just go ahead and put new ones in it. That way it's done. That way we know our drive line is going to be set. Now, there's still one more universal joint I need to get, but I didn't have it with me when I bought these to be able to match and make sure it was the right one. It may be the same, I don't know. But we're going to do the 3 of the 4, and then when we get the 4th one, we'll put it in a little bit later. And as you can see, the old universal joint is still there in the drive shaft the way I taped it up when we took this thing apart months ago. Remember, on the rear one, to get it out, we had to take out this dog bone that will hook right there in the back here to the differential housing. So we're gonna try to get that installed today as well. Apologize if that background noise is too much. You see that yellow truck there with that trailer. After I started recording, he pulled in and that thing's been running ever since. I hope he's not gonna be here all day. Maybe he's just on a lunch break. All right, guys, so what I've done now, I've taken this ratchet strap and got it down underneath the drive shaft just to pick it up so it's not on the ground. This should give me ample room here to work, and I should still be able to rotate it with the transmission in neutral to swap out this first U-joint, get it reconnected. All right, guys, so the process here should be simple. I've got these 2 cap bolts here holding that cap in. There's gonna be 2 on the other side as well. Once we get the caps loosened, we should be able to pry a little bit, get this cap to pop up, and then get underneath it and just work that cap out, flip it over, work out the other cap, and then it'll be time to clean it all up and install the new one. Challenging trying to get that universal joint out of there. As you saw in that time lapse, to beat the crap out of it. It was kind of rusted in there. So now let's open up the new one and get it ready to install. Well, guys, you saw me unpackage that, and I was going to go over what was in the kit, but I got distracted. I don't know if you guys see that car pulling in the parking lot right there. That was 3 Finger Bob. Self-explanatory, I think. He's been a good friend of ours, and he also watches the channel and so on and so forth. But he stopped by to say hi, and there's another gentleman here that works for the state, part of that asphalt crew that you saw that truck there earlier. He came over and talked to me for a little bit. So I halfway installed this U-joint without filming anything, but I'll show you what I've done so far. See, the U-joint is gone. Now it comes with all new bolts, and it even comes with new straps, so you can get rid of the old ones. just in case these are fatigued any. There we go. It is in on the drive shaft side. So now we just gotta hook it to the yoke. So we're going to put the other end caps on. We'll get it set up into place, strap her down. All right, guys, so I've got everything greased up in here, and I'm going to go ahead and set these caps on there. And then I'm going to have to loosen that strap that I got holding that drive shaft in a little bit so I can try to level it up. I'm going to try to do it without dropping it too far, because this drive shaft is quite heavy. Try to slide that into place. Now, guys, I'm checking both ends here to make sure that they're seated all the way in, because you can slide this drive shaft in and out from the yoke up front. There's a slip joint there. Now we're going to take the new caps and the new bolts and get them started. One installed. Now we've got to do the two on the small drive shaft, which I'm hoping will be a little bit easier. One of them I can probably do up here on the bench because the drive shaft is not installed in the truck. So as you can see here, neither one of these U-joints use the strap. They're all going to get the end caps at all 4 points on each of those, and will then bolt in. So I'm going to get this one removed, get this all cleaned up, get the yokes cleaned up, and then what I'll do is I'll install the two new U-joints in the drive shaft first, and then I'll take the drive shaft down and I'll have to do the two ends at the yokes for the individual differentials. All right, guys, as I'm assembling one of these other U-joints here, I thought maybe I'd show you the step-by-step process that I use to do this. Now, I did make one mistake. I did not bring my grease gun with me, and you don't want to put these together dry. These are greasable U-joints, and when you have a greasable U-joint, usually they only have enough grease in them just to kind of hold all the needle bearings in place, not really enough for operation. So you want to grease them and lube them before you do the installation. Because I forgot my grease gun, actually what I'm using, believe it or not, is the Amsoil V-twin transmission fluid. Understand that a universal joint doesn't spin in its place. It'll rock back and forth as the drive shaft turns, so it doesn't get high speed rolling action in there. The only reason something like a gear oil wouldn't work permanently is just because there's no way to absolutely keep it in there. So I'm using this just as a primary lube as I assemble it. That way nothing goes together dry, and it will work. And then when I come back with the grease gun later on, I can actually fill them with grease, and it'll actually push most of this oil out. But at least that way it's not in there dry from the start. What I've done here is, as I unpackage it, I'm cleaning everything. You'd be surprised how much dust is on this universal joint from it sitting in this package and sitting on a shelf for who knows how long. So I cleaned everything. You see I've got plenty of lubricant in there. Also going to lubricate the spindles before I put them in, and then I'll show you a couple tricks on how I actually set these in place. Basically, the universal joint is going to go in between these flanges here, and one of these caps will come in from the bottom, the other cap will come in from the top. And sometimes you have to tap them with a hammer to get them to go into place. And what you want to be careful of, if you look inside here, there's a whole bunch of little needle bearings in it. You don't want to knock the needle bearings out. During installation, if you disrupt those and they start to come out of place, it'll cause this cap to bind up on the actual universal joint. It can also scratch and score it, which will cause premature failure, and we don't want to do that. So what I do is I get the universal joint in place, I kind of set the cap in place gently, and then I move the universal joint up into the cap, and then I tap with the hammer as I'm holding the universal joint inside the cavity. That way the bearings cannot come loose. All right, guys, so I've got my cap, I've got my hammer, and I have the universal joint. Set it in place gently. get the cap started on there. Oh, well, look, that one slid right in. Not all the way, but while I'm holding upwards pressure on the universal joint, just tap it down the rest of the way. Flip it over the other way. Take your other cap and install it in the same manner. Kind of get it started. Then move that universal joint up into the cap, like so, and then gently tap. All right. Then I just use my hammer, lightly tap to align the holes, and you bolt it in. Now, all of these universal kits came with new hardware, well, at least new fasteners. You know, the front one that we did had the new bolts and the new straps. Because these U-joints are a little bit different, they've actually got the bolting caps at all 4 points. So it came with the 4 new caps, and it came with the 8 new fasteners to bolt it all in, 16 for 2 kits. What it did not come with, however, is these locking tabs. So the way these work is they're gonna set on the cap, and then the bolts go through the locking tabs, through the cap, and then in there. And then once it's done, if you look at these little ears on here, you take these ears and you bend them up against the head of the bolt, and that will stop it from being able to rotate out. Now, these also have Loctite on them, so it's kind of double security. But because it didn't come with them with the new kit, cleaning up the old ones and just reusing the old ones. They can be multiple use. These are in really good shape. I don't see any reason why they won't work, especially when we've already got Loctite on it as well. So again, here, the lock plate goes on. Then you install the 2 fasteners. Zip those down. Then you just take a punch and fold that tab up so it's against the head of the bolt. Those bolts will never come back out. All right, guys, so as you can see, I've got both of those universal joints in the drive shaft, front and rear part. So now it's gonna be time to come back over here to the frame and actually install the drive shaft in. It's actually gonna be a little bit tricky because this thing is heavy. I know it's a small drive shaft, but man, is it heavy. Trying to hold one end up while getting the other end in place is gonna be tricky. So I'm going to use a microfiber cloth, and I'm gonna wrap one end so I can kind of set it in the yoke of the drive shaft, or the differential, I'm sorry. That way I can work on one side at a time, but hopefully it will still support the weight. And I can tell you the wonders of YouTube. So as I'm prepping to put this drive shaft in, I couldn't remember which end went forward and which end went backwards. I thought I had marked it when I pulled it out, and apparently I didn't. But luckily, with the power of YouTube, I went back and watched the video of me removing the drive shaft, and I was able to see how it was originally orientated. But it also saddened me a little bit. I realized I posted that video back in July. It was like July 4th weekend or something. So we started this rent project in July, guys. That was before we went out to Sturgis, before we went to the Deadwood rally. Yeah, this has just taken way too long to make any progress on this truck. I wish I had a little bit lighter of a schedule that I could get this stuff done faster, but we're gonna try to make some changes to that. Well, guys, it's not quite working out as easy as I hope, but I'm gonna go ahead and get some of these bolts started. I wasn't able to line up the front yet, but I figure if I get this one in and secure, then I don't have to worry about knocking it out while I try to line up the front. So just kind of putting those in hand tight just so they don't fall out. because the wheels are on the ground, I can't rotate this drive shaft back here. So I got to try to hold this up, push that cap in, and line up those bolts down there to get them started. Luckily, the cap is spinning in nice and easy. I didn't have to beat it in. It feels like the bolt is threading in nice and simple as well. All right, it's in. It's not tightened down, but all 4 of the bolts are started. That'll keep the drive shaft from falling out while I try to line up the front. Again, guys, I wasn't kidding on how heavy that thing is, trying to move it and pick it up to line everything up. It definitely takes a little bit of effort. See, I still have to get the front one in and lined up, but at least now I don't have to worry about the back end falling. I can muscle it a little bit more. Well, Houston, we have a problem. I wasn't able to get the camera set up in a good spot so you could see what I was fighting with, but after I got that rear universal joint attached to the yoke on the second drive, what you have to do is you have to extend the drive shaft a little bit. There's a slip joint in there designed so that the length of the drive shaft can change during operation as the suspension travels up and down. So I was pulling on the forward end of the drive shaft, trying to get it all to line up with the yoke coming out of the power divider on drive number 1, and I just couldn't get it to go far enough. Put a pry bar in there, try to give it a little bit more oomph, and I just couldn't get it to go far enough to get that universal joint to straighten up so I get the caps in it. So I'm gonna have to service the slip joint. Now, to make things worse is, once I pried it to that point, I had got it to where it was wedged in there and I couldn't get it to collapse to get it back out. So I probably spent half an hour trying to get it out when it wasn't even bolted in yet. But it was just that spot when I couldn't shorten or lengthen it, I wasn't able to get the angles right. But I finally got it out. And when I tipped it up, there's a hole in one end and a bunch of water ran out. Now, this has been locked up inside that trailer behind me since July, and that trailer doesn't have anything else in there wet. So that water must have been inside the drive shaft from long before then. So it's probably just rusty. So I could find a way to get it apart, service it, re-lube it, get it all back together, and then we continue with this. All right, guys, so here's another look at the drive shaft, and right there is the slip joint. So these are 2 separate pieces, and they're able to slide in and out to compensate for the suspension travel. If you look behind this U-joint at the very end, there is a small hole right down there, and water was running out of it. So chances are this is all full of water, and I'm gonna have to fight now to get it apart to service it. All right, guys, so I have spent the better part of an hour, and you see I cleaned it all up the best I could. Now, I wasn't able to completely separate the drive shaft. If you look from this end, you'll see that blue cap in there. That is a plastic cap. Assuming that maybe there's some type of a nut and a washer or something behind that cap, but I wasn't able to get that cap out. I tried prying on it gently with a screwdriver. It didn't want to budge. And because it's plastic, I was kind of afraid of breaking it. So I wasn't able to separate it. But what I did do is I loosened up the seal that's right here in the middle joint, and I took out the Zerk fitting, and I sprayed probably 2 cans worth of brake clean down in there and just cycled back and forth as much as I could with the slip joint, and then cleaned it, and then sprayed more in there and did it all again. Then sprayed some penetrating oil down in there, did it again, sprayed it back out with brake clean until my brake clean was pretty much running out clear. So pretty confident I got most of the old gummed up grease out of there. And then I took some more of that V-twin transmission fluid like we use in the U-joints, and I fed it down into the splines and then worked it back and forth and just kept filling it with oil until I worked it all back and forth. So now it actually moves nice and free like it should. I put the Zerk fitting back in, so I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall it, and then when I come back up with the grease gun to grease the rest of the drive line, I'll make sure to grease that really good too, and fill that whole cavity back up with grease after I cleared it all out. Well, guys, second verse, just like the first, only this time it worked without any problems. I actually had a little bit more trouble getting everything to line up this time, as far as just like holding it in the right position. It seemed to go easier the first time, but I was able to get that extension out of the drive shaft that I needed to make everything line up, so it is done. Both drive shafts are fully installed, bolted down. All we got to do is grease them when I come back with the grease gun. Now, my original plan was after the drive shaft got in, I was going to go home and eat lunch and then come back up with the gear lube. We're using the Amsoil 7590 severe gear in both the differentials. It's going to bring up the grease. And at that point, I was going to throw in the rear dog bone and hook up the air line. And then we were going to start the truck and try to take it for a drive through the parking lot. But this second drive shaft ate up so much time between trying to install it twice and trying to free everything up that it's now 5:30 in the evening. The temperature is beginning to drop, and on top of that, I've only got 30, maybe 45 more minutes worth of daylight. So I'm probably not going to finish this project today, but I'm going to drive this truck before I close this video. So you guys just have to hang tight. Maybe we'll be back up tomorrow morning to finish the job. Well, guys, bonus feature. I decided not to go home just yet. So I got the dog bone in and I got the air line in. That is the air line that powers the power divider. And the rear dog bone is now in place above the drive shaft. But yeah, guys, as you can see, the sun is getting low. Like I said a little bit ago, it's getting chilly. So I'm going to clean up my tools, pick up my garbage, and call it quits for the night. Guys, good morning again. It is the next morning and we're back up here at Project Kenworth and we are going to finish. I promise, I hope I promise, we're going to finish getting this driveline situation buttoned up and done. All right, as you can see, I've got all my parts laid out here. So these here are the drain plugs for the differentials. This one here is the fill plug for the front differential. Got the new temperature sensors, the old temperature sensors. These rubber washers actually went behind this bracket, so it would actually assemble kind of like this. And then the sensor went through it and into the rear end housing. Now there is another one of these brackets. It's still attached to the truck. I did not take it off because it was in good shape. This is the one that was all bent up and I had to straighten it back out, if you guys remember in a past video. We've also got the large magnets. And another note on these is where these bolt into the rear end housing is where the fluid level should be, just to the bottom of the hole that this threads in on. And then right here we have the breather assemblies. These two here are the old ones. These three are all new. Unfortunately, I can only find one new one that was just like the originals, but I found these other ones here and they all do the same job. It's just to let excess pressure vent out. So I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use yet. I have to admit, my first thought was I didn't want to put the new temperature sensors in just yet. What I wanted to do was install it with the old temperature sensors, get everything painted, and then switch the sensors out, because then we'd have the nice pretty brass sensors in contrast to the fresh paint that would be on there. But those actually sit so low in the oil sump that to change them out, we're going to lose a bunch of fluid. So I'm just going to go ahead and install the new ones now, and we'll just, you know, do a fairly diligent job at taping those up when it comes time to actually do the paint job. Hey guys, and the Amsoil SVG 7590 100% synthetic gear lube is what we're going to be putting in both of these rear ends, and we are just about ready to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and thread seal all the threads on these things. I've already cleaned all the parts and laid them out, as you can see. So now it's just a matter of getting the sealant on the threads, reinstalling everything other than where I'm going to fill it at and check the level at, and we'll go from there. Okay guys, I've got the drain plugs in, the temperature sensors in. We had to wait on those magnets, the large magnets, because that's how we're going to check our fill level. And now I have the 5-gallon bucket set up and ready to start pumping the oil into the rear end. Starting with the front differential first. I've got the bucket sitting up here, a little hand pump going down into the fill. Now you'll see that I put a zip tie holding that hose down in there, because this pump doesn't stay attached to the bucket very well. So it takes 2 hands to operate the pump. That way I can ensure that my tube doesn't pop out of the hole and make a mess. To do that, that's why I just set it up on a time lapse. That pump will actually draw fluid when you draw it up and you push it down. So every stroke it was putting a certain amount of oil in there, and it took right at the whole 5-gallon bucket. I got it to where it started running out, and I put the cap back in it. I gave it a few more good pumps for good measure. I think it was 3 or 4 more cycles and the bucket was empty, or at least what the pump would pick up. So that front one is done and it's full. We're gonna move to the back one. I'm not gonna throw that footage in here because it's gonna be exactly the same thing that you just saw. All right guys, I got the second differential topped off with fluid. Got the magnets put back in and even got the vent tubes reinstalled. They are done, they're complete. Now, the little vents on the top, I did put the old ones back in for now, only because once we paint, I can just screw those out, screw the new ones back in, and that'll just look nicer rather than them being painted. They'll have a little bit of contrast there. Just like how we are going to replace all the airbags and the shocks in this truck eventually, but I don't want to do it before we paint because they're going to get paint all over them. Doing it after we paint will just kind of make it look that much better, because then you'll get that contrast of the new part in with the freshly painted frame and not have paint all over the items. So at this point, we're gonna try and see if we can get this thing to start. Now, I've had it on the battery charger since yesterday, and what's happening here is it's charging for a couple of hours, and then it goes to where it's saying fully charged, but the bad battery light comes on as well. Now, it has done this with me in the past before, and I just keep recycling it, and it keeps doing the cycle over and over again, and eventually it'll say fully charged without the bad battery. I think just because they were that low, and like I said, these batteries are probably 4 or 5 years old, been sitting in this truck for all this time. But we're gonna see if we can get it to start anyways. But before we do that, I'm gonna pull off these buckets. They were there just to keep the rain out of the exhaust pipes since we took the whole stack system off. Guys, moment of truth. Well guys, she's running. Now, the batteries weren't enough to get it started. I tried, it turned over real slow and then stopped. And I'd actually set the camera up to kind of record that, and I forgot to hit record, so we didn't get that. I ended up having to move the Excursion over there, hook the jumper cables up to it, and I let the Excursion sit there and run for probably 15 to 20 minutes while I was cleaning up my area. Still had a lot of broken nuts and bolts and so on and so forth that have, you know, over the last 7 months, the projects we've been working on this, just a lot of debris and chunks of rust and so on and so forth that were on the ground underneath it. And because I intend to drive this in a moment, I didn't want to run over any of that stuff. Well guys, it sounds like she's running really, really good. Just letting the air pressure finish building up. For some reason, the airbags weren't airing up, so I went to check that. The switch was in the right position for the send air, so I dumped it, and nothing happened. And then I flipped it back on. I heard air purge somewhere, and now it's starting to rise up. So looked like maybe that was just a sticky valve. Well guys, we're gonna go ahead and take it for a spin real fast, but remember, we're probably not gonna leave the parking lot. As you see, there's no headlights in it. There's no turn signals. I mean, all the lights are gone. There's no front bumper on it. I don't even have a driver's seat in it. I'm gonna like sit on a 5-gallon bucket or something, but it'll be nice just to be able to move it around the property and get it out of that spot where it's been sitting since June or July when I parked it there. Well guys, we're gonna call that a success. We were able to drive the Kenworth around and everything seemed to work fine. No binding, everything is good. So I am very happy that we have gotten to this point. Do have a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news, and they all kind of intertwine into one here. So we'll start with the bad news. This video right here will probably be the last video that you see with Project Kenworth, at least for a little while. And here's why. As of the recording of this, we have got less than 3 weeks until I need to be in Daytona Beach to get ready for Bike Week. So Bike Week starts March 4th. There's a lot of work to do on Goliath to get us there. A lot of work to do on the trailer. A lot of prep work that needs to go into getting the entire rig ready for the road for this oncoming motorcycle rally season. So with that said, Project Kenworth's got to come to a halt. I know it kind of sucks. I need to get it done, but I have to prioritize this. Hopefully I can get everything done on this before we go to Bike Week, so that when we get home from Bike Week, I'll have about 6 weeks before we have to be at our next event. And at that point, maybe we can jump back on this and start working on the paint job and a few of the other things to get this thing that much closer to being ready for the road. So guys, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed all of this. Project Kenworth is coming along. We're getting ready to start on Project Goliath to get a bunch of things done, so there will be more content coming your way. All right guys, so I hope you enjoyed everything. Thank you for watching, and if you want to leave a comment, tell me your thoughts on the projects, and until the next time I see you, keep those engines running. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe.